This next panel explores the powerful impact that startup accelerators and incubators and innovation programs can make on shaping startups. Everyone on this panel has very deep operational expertise in this field. First, we have Dr. Daniel Biene, part of the leadership and strategy team of the Bundeswehr Cyber Innovation Hub. Then we have Vijay Sekhara, program director at ScaleWolf, and Kadi, chief development officer at Starburst Aerospace. This panel is moderated by Ryan Benitez, partner at Decisive Point. Give him a round of applause, everyone.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think everyone's holding out to see the generals, or if they're here to see us, right? All right, well, we've got a very exciting group of experts today, and you know, traditional technology accelerators, they've been around for about 20 years now. But in the past 4 or 5 years, we've really seen what we call dual-use accelerators come onto the scene, where startups are looking to accelerate their technology both to the mission of the warfighter and also to market. So I'd like to start off and jump right into it with Vijay from ScaleWolf. And Vijay, if you could share a little bit about why is there a need for dual-use accelerators? What makes them a little bit more nuanced than a traditional commercial-focused accelerator?
Yeah, of course, thank you. Well, first off, if it were not for dual-use accelerators, I would not get to see all of your lovely faces, so appreciate that. But, you know, I think with the idea of dual-use coming onto the scene the past 5 years or so, prior to that, we've been looking to accelerate technologies with, it seems like, one arm tied behind our back. Given the accelerators that have popped up over the past few years, this has given us an opportunity to collaborate in new ways we haven't before, meet other means of strategic partnerships, funding, tech development, other government opportunities that, you know, a commercial technology may have never thought of before. And really, you know, I've worked with startups in the fashion sector that now have a contract with the US Air Force, or a startup that had a wearable technology that goes in a shoe that the US Army is now looking to use, you know, for its soldiers. And these opportunities now give these entrepreneurs new means to develop their technology, become a viable business, but also for both government and commercial to see what else is out there that they have not seen in the past.
Kadi, let's turn to you. What would you say are the core components of a dual-use accelerator, noting that there's many different kinds out there, but at least at Starburst, what are the core components, and then what are some of the maybe obstacles or challenges within a dual-use accelerator?
Thanks a lot, Ryan. And maybe can I challenge the framing a little bit, the framing of dual-use accelerators. I think, you know, a few years ago, before the Ukraine war or the full-scale invasion happened, so the theory was that you know, pure play defense companies weren't really commercially viable. You know, the exit opportunities are few and far, so we should just concentrate on dual use. So first of all, I think these times are over. The organizers here did a separate small session held by Deal Room, or organized by Deal Room, where they talked about actual defense tech, like not dual use, but defense tech. My first point is, I think we're at a stage where we shouldn't just talk about dual use, we should actually talk about pure play defense, and these two can exist together and should exist together. Now, in terms of what are the components of a really good accelerator program is, first of all, when we look at defense and dual use, it's not just innovation, it's innovation adoption. And again, that is something, I guess in the US, people already sort of understood it and focused on it because of China, but in Europe, that change has really come with Ukraine. which is that if you're not able to actually field, test, and sell your product in a couple of years, you're not going to be hugely relevant to European governments right now, which is just the truth because we've got war raging on in Europe as we speak. The second bit about what makes it a good dual-user defense accelerator is I've seen and still see a lot of people in this field giving a lot of sort of formulaic advice, being like, this is the standard defense adoption path. Every time I hear that, I get shivers, and not the good kind, because in defense, there are no such things. There just aren't. So basically, even if you're running a cohort-based accelerator, what makes the difference is you actually working one-to-one with that company, trying to figure out what is their pathway, not what is the pathway down which you sort of push them. And then the last bit is about customers and clients. And there, I would say a lot of the value of accelerators actually are the network of the people working there. And when you open your phone book or when you open your LinkedIn, don't just go to the obvious ones. Yes, everyone loves special operation forces, but at the end of the day, if you're looking to get these companies into something that's scalable, that brings bigger contracts, frankly speaking, get them into something quite boring, where they could make something that's, really repetitive, boring, be maintenance, be, whatever. Get them into something like that, because that's where, more of the money actually is.
Thank you. I want to touch on innovation adoption. I'm going to hit Daniel first. So Daniel is leading an effort within the German government on innovating from within, and with the goal of adopting innovation. So Daniel, could you talk a little bit about how your model is a little bit different than an accelerator, and how you're looking at it from the ground up end users?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. As you already said, we do not run an accelerator program in the German Armed Forces right now, but what we do is we engage in user-driven bottom-up innovation. And we have been doing that for a couple of years now, so it's a pretty well-honed program, I would say. The way it works is really pretty simple, and that's the whole idea. We believe it needs to be simple. Anyone within the German Armed Forces can approach us with an innovation idea, and then we check that idea according to certain criteria. If it passes the test, we set up an innovation project, and then the goal is to bring the initial idea to fruition within a pretty tight time frame, depending on what it is, 6, 9, 12-month maximum, which I believe is pretty ambitious, especially in a public service setting. Well, I should probably say that fruition means it needs to be a solution that's actually in use within the forces every day. So it cannot just be a prototype or a better idea or anything like this. It needs to be an existing solution. That's what we do. And in order to make that happen, there's obviously a point in time that comes pretty soon where we have to ask ourselves, how do we make it happen? We obviously, because the time frame is so tight, prefer to not develop things from scratch. In fact, we have no capabilities for research or any groundwork. So we look into the market, and ideally we source something that's already readily available somewhere, be it in the civilian world, be it in the defense supply world. A lot of the times we take things that exist, but for a different purpose, I guess you can say dual-use things, and adapt them to our needs to fit our requirements. And that's also the point in time where we tend to work with startups, because when it comes to more innovative things, there are now startups out there, and we like to work with them, not just because it fulfills our needs, but also because we believe that the best way to work with startups is to actually give them access to real life with the troops in the field, and also real revenue, instead of some kind of subsidy or something that might not be so useful at the end of the day for them, because we do realize that when we do business with startups, it pays off for them tenfold at least, because when investors then look at this, at the fact that they have real traction with the military, they tend to be much more open to investing at a decent valuation and so forth. So that's really what we do in a nutshell.
Thanks, and I think getting out into the field is really important for programs like this. And Kadi, you talked about how although these accelerator programs are focused on group cohorts, a lot of them need that one-on-one support. So Vijay, you've been working with the Lithuanian government. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic and the government involvement, and perhaps what has worked there?
Sure, and I want to bring back two items that were brought up: adaptability of a program and the simplicity of one as well. Working with the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense, it's not a matter of scouting technology for the sake of it, but potentially finding an end user at the end of that program. And having a partner like the Lithuanian government, other individuals and groups that we've been able to bring into our program at ScaleWolf, has allowed us to be able to find that next step, not necessarily the end of the road, but the next junction of the road for some of these startups. And with respect to that adaptability and simplicity, we don't run the same program every cohort, and we shouldn't, because each cohort that we have is going to be different. There will be different verticals, different technologies, different needs. We may work with a team that is Series A, or we may work with a team that hasn't even incorporated yet. So that ability to adapt and keep things simple has allowed us to really have some strong results in our program. And to another point you mentioned, even with respect to this conference, we appreciate having all of you here listening to our panel, but know that there's so much more to come out of this next 2 days. It's the networking that you do after this panel. It's the evening activities. It's the one-on-ones that you have while you're here. That is just as vital for this conference, and even for our accelerators as well. And being able to matchmake and make those connections really makes it worthwhile.
Kadi, you come from government, and now you're on the accelerator side. For those that were here this morning, we heard Clayton from Incutel talk about the trust component when it comes to doing business between industry and the military. Has that been, how do you look at building trust between what you're doing at Starburst and the government stakeholders?
I take a long sigh. Yeah, most of my life has been, most of my working life has been spent in government, and it is, as you say, a much more difficult space to build government, to build trust in. I guess, and there's no easy way in, but I guess what has changed recently, or let's say in the last 2-3 years, again, the ability and the openness of governments, and not just Ukraine, but other governments, to feel, test, iterate, help iterate on products has grown a lot. I mean, it's starkest in Ukraine, but it's happening elsewhere as well. And that's how you build it. I mean, you're not, probably no government's going to buy a massive amount of products straight from a startup, and you'll probably not be able to produce them anyway. But having that relationship of being able to sort of test, feel, show what you've got, and also show that you're ready to improve quickly, I think is the easiest way to build that trust. I mean, obviously you shouldn't have any adversarial capital, but I guess that's sort of like basic hygiene anyway.
Daniel, how about your take on that question, putting your government hat on and working with industry? How do you think that trust component plays out, and what could be improved, or what's going well?
Well, specifically in my work, it's mostly startups. We have, in my specific area, work very little to do with defense primes. And To be completely transparent, and this is probably nothing new for most of you, in Germany there are very few. It's a pretty new topic. It only came up in the last 2 years maybe, really, to a more significant extent. And so everything is very fresh. So we, in Germany specifically, are really doing groundwork, building trust. There's obviously hesitations in working with startups. The age-old question, will you still be there tomorrow, comes up all the time. So that's really basic trust topics. But that's yet another reason why we currently take this approach of working on real projects, developing real solutions quickly, because we think that's probably one of the better ways to build trusts quickly instead of having these more abstract discussions.
Yeah, I definitely think there's been a mindset shift over the past couple of years when it comes to that collaboration. What about, when we talk about acceleration, what does that even mean, right? What are the tangible outcomes of acceleration? How do we measure it? And I think programs do it differently. So let me turn to Vijay first. And Vijay, how do you define acceleration, and what are quote-unquote acceleration outcomes that you look for out of ScaleWolf?
Right, and with respect to acceleration, I'd like to know that regardless if it's a 5, 10, 15-week program, that they have progressed at a greater rate of speed with us than if they were on their own. I think that's just the physics definition of acceleration. But those KPIs are different for each team, for each startup, and it's different for each potential end user, stakeholder who's funding the accelerator, who's running the accelerator. A one-on-one connection after a seminar, I'll count that. Raising the next round, of course, that's another one too. Finding other teammates to help scale your employees at your company. It's what are their greatest needs, and are we, the folks in charge of this accelerator, actually helping them cross that finish line or go to that next step? So whether it's funding, whether it's finding a strategic partnership, a customer, even just getting to that MVP, even how do I set up a business in Lithuania? So that's there's a multitude of them, but I do think it's important to have and to be able to measure something tangible after the end of each accelerator for each team.
Kadi, any perspective on measuring acceleration?
At the end of the day, it's very easy, right? It's customers, it's uptake, like everything else, leading up to it. Obviously, you have to measure different things because it's not going to happen instantaneously. But at the end of the day, it's the uptake of the technology and its customers.
Let's talk a little bit about, so acceleration, usually these are a couple-month programs, but as we all know, technology adoption, especially within government and the military, often takes much longer than the 3 months. But if we're looking at current events and the full spectrum of conflict, all the way from peaceful military engagement on the left and, combat on the right, how, the further you get to the right, how do you think about having to change your model a little bit with that sense of urgency? Let's go down the row here on that question. So, Daniel, how do you change your model when there's that true sense of urgency? And is there that sense now?
Yeah, we actually had a few projects that were driven by events in Ukraine, and obviously the fact that we are wired for speed, if you will, that we have these pretty tight timelines in our project did help because we were able to supply products pretty quickly, working with civilian suppliers, adapting them to military needs. So in a way that's in our DNA as the innovation hub of the German Armed Forces, but of course that unfortunately doesn't apply for the entire organization. Our procurement processes in the wider organization are still extremely slow. The average duration of procurement processes is around 7 years right now, which obviously is no match for the current situation. And we are working on changing that, but it takes time.
I think I almost see that spectrum geographically as well. So working with teams in the Baltics, in Ukraine, there's a lot of, I need stuff that blows up yesterday. So there's a lot of drone technology, counter drone tech, counter drone tech. But it's, where the need is, the money will go. Whereas, working at a previous accelerator more focused on the States prior, it almost feels like because we are so far from the front, we have the luxury to develop, scale, and fund other dual-use technologies that may not necessarily be what's needed right now at the front. So it's that ability to kind of go back and forth along that scale based on where the need is, where we are in the war, and I think that's what's so great about this whole concept of dual-use tech. So mobile batteries on the field that we may need for the war today can be used for different commercial applications tomorrow. And being able to work with dual-use teams allows us to find those different applications depending on where we are in that spectrum.
I think it's a great question. So two things. First, a focus on capability, and a focus on capability both from the end user side as well as the startup side. And I'll dig into that a little bit more. I mean, what we see still today, even if we pay lip service to effect-based planning, et cetera, it is still platform-based. As someone said in an earlier panel, procurement agencies are procuring items, they're not procuring capabilities. And that ideally is not like that if you want to have these capabilities quickly. I mean, the example of artillery and drones was brought earlier on, there's many more. On the other hand, with startups, again, just having a good technology is not enough. So that technology needs to turn into a capability, and that is often a much more complicated process than just developing the technology. So having that in mind and focusing on that. And again, part of that is going to the end users, going to the field, iterating, finding out from the customer what's wrong, what you need to change. The second bit that we are mostly lacking in Europe, in the US it exists, is something that enables customers and government customers to transition from a proof of concept contract or demonstration contract, whatever you call it, to an actual production contract quickly. And in the US, and Ryan, you'll be able to correct me if I misspeak, but with OTAs, it's something like 6 weeks, right, that you can get that. In Europe, I mean, maybe it exists somewhere. It certainly doesn't exist in the UK. It doesn't exist in my native Estonia. So I suspect it doesn't exist in most countries. And that ability, like if you already know it works, if there's been a competitive process already, then the ability to transition quickly and get that capability in your hands quickly is, I think, so precious. And that's where we should move. And it's not really something that an accelerator program can change, if I'm being, very blunt, but that will make the difference.
Yeah, I think in the U.S. we see organizations like the Defense Innovation Unit, which are, yes, they have a venture portfolio with accelerator programs, but they've built up a whole structure and functionality behind that and in support of that to make sure that that transition is happening to meet real needs. And they have done it very well because they've become a focal and a central point. And there's many of those folks here today, so I urge you to go and speak with them. We're nearing the end of our panel here. We have a lot of government in the room. So I would like to turn this over for your asks to any of the government stakeholders in the room as for when it comes to your programs.
I can start. I mean, I mentioned a few things already, I suppose, but it's something that, again, I'm stealing someone else's idea that sat in this very place like an hour or two ago, but I thought it really highlighted a problem and at the same time an opportunity that Europe has, which is massive amounts of non-dilutive grant money and not enough money for contracts. And if you flip that, you've got, again, when you just look at what's in the European Union, I mean, European Defence Fund is one, but the Horizon project, which is, you know, a 10 billion project, if you flip that and use that money instead for contracts, then that will both get you the capabilities you need quicker, but that will also make these startups more attractive to investors, who at the end of the day want them to have customers and to other customers. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I would say for our government folks, I challenge each of you coming from the accelerator side, you know, what is the problem you're facing? Define that challenge statement and speak to our entrepreneurs, our investors here, our other folks in industry, and see if you can find a solution to that problem, make that connection, and honestly figure out where to go from there. And we're here to help, of course.
All right, thank you. Let's, Daniel, close this out.
You already stole my words, more or less, because, yeah, connection is key. And speaking for Germany, we have some homework to do, accelerating things in the innovation field. And specifically for that, connection is really key. There's no need to reinvent the wheel in various countries. There's a lot of best practices out there. And so connecting and making things work and doing things faster and better, I think is just critical.
Great, so let's have a conversation and let's collaborate. Thank you.